Nicole never imagined that a single envelope, thin as paper yet heavy with decades of buried truth, could detonate her entire sense of self. But that is exactly what happens on Beyond the Gates when fate, secrets, and bloodlines collide in a way that leaves Fairmont Crest reeling. Because when Nicole Dupree finally learns that the woman who raised her, protected her, disciplined her, and loved her with a fierce, sometimes suffocating devotion, Anita Dupree, is not her biological mother. The revelation doesn't arrive with cinematic grace or gentle explanation, but instead crashes into her life through a cruel convergence of misplaced paperwork, whispered suspicion, and one irreversible DNA test that strips away the lies Anita has clung to for decades. And the moment Nicole hears the words spoken aloud by a doctor who doesn't realize he's just shattered a family dynasty. Anita Dupree is not your birth mother. Time seems to stop as Nicole's world fractures into before and after. Because suddenly every memory feels tainted, every childhood moment replayed through a new lens of doubt, every maternal hug echoing with questions that can no longer be ignored. And what makes the betrayal cut deepest is not simply that Anita lied, but that she lied so convincingly, so consistently, that Nicole never once suspected her entire identity had been carefully curated like a performance meant to protect someone else at Nicole's expense. And as Nicole staggers out of the hospital in a daze, clutching test results she never asked for but can never unsee, the walls of Fairmont Crest, once symbols of legacy and permanence, feel cold and unfamiliar. Because if Anita isn't her mother, then who is? And why was Nicole the price paid to keep that secret buried? And when Nicole finally confronts Anita in the Dupree living room, the confrontation is not explosive at first but eerily quiet. A stillness so heavy it feels dangerous, because Anita knows immediately that the truth has surfaced the moment she sees Nicole's eyes that once looked at her with unquestioning trust and now burn with hurt, confusion, and rage. And when Nicole demands the truth, no more half answers, no more deflections, no more "I did what I had to do." Anita's composure cracks in a way viewers have never seen before, revealing a woman who built her life on a choice she believed was merciful but has now become unforgivable. And through tears she finally admits what she swore she'd take to her grave. Nicole was born to another woman, a woman whose name Anita has avoided speaking for decades, a woman whose connection to the Dupree family threatens to unravel not just Nicole's identity, but the moral authority Anita has wielded for years. And as Anita confesses that she raised Nicole as her own to save her, without fully explaining what she was saved from, Nicole's heartbreak curdles into fury. Because saving a child does not give you the right to erase her truth, and the emotional fallout ripples outward instantly, dragging every Dupree into the storm whether they want to be involved or not. Because secrets like this don't exist in isolation. They metastasize, infecting marriages, alliances, and long-held resentments, and soon questions begin to surface that threaten to expose even darker truths, like who authorized the falsified birth records, who benefited from Nicole being raised as Anita's daughter, and whether the lie was about love or power. And as Nicole spirals, grappling with the terrifying realization that her entire sense of belonging may be based on a carefully orchestrated deception, she begins to re-examine every interaction she ever had with Anita, wondering whether the moments of distance, control, and emotional restraint were the guilt of a woman afraid her secret would slip or the fear of losing a daughter who was never legally hers to begin with. And the tragedy of it all is that despite the betrayal, Nicole still loves Anita, which makes the anger even more unbearable. Because how do you reconcile genuine love with an unforgivable lie? And when Nicole demands to know the identity of her birth mother, Anita hesitates just long enough to confirm that the answer will open wounds far deeper than Nicole realizes. Because the truth isn't just personal, it's political within Fairmont Crest, tied to old rivalries, long-forgotten scandals, and a woman whose reappearance could upend the entire social order. And as word of the revelation spreads, whispers ripple through the elite circles of the community, with allies choosing sides and enemies sharpening their knives, because bloodlines are currency in this world, and Nicole's suddenly uncertain lineage makes her both vulnerable and dangerous. And while Anita insists she acted out of love, The cracks in her story widen as others begin to question what she really knew and when, especially as clues emerge suggesting that Nicole's biological mother may have been deliberately erased, not lost, and that Anita's decision may have been less about protection and more about control. And as Nicole pulls away from the Dupree name she once wore with pride, struggling to reclaim ownership over her life, viewers are left watching a woman forced to rebuild herself from emotional rubble, knowing that even if she forgives Anita someday, nothing will ever be the same again. Because Beyond the Gates doesn't just reveal that Anita isn't Nicole's birth mother, it exposes how far people will go to preserve legacy, how love can become a weapon when mixed with fear, and how the truth, once unleashed, doesn't simply set you free, but demands a reckoning that reshapes every relationship in its path, leaving Nicole standing at the edge of a new, terrifying chapter where answers may finally come, but at a cost no one is prepared to pay. The fallout only intensifies in the days that follow, because Nicole's discovery is not a wound that can be bandaged with apologies or explanations, and as Beyond the Gates barrels forward, the emotional aftershocks begin to rearrange every corner of Fairmont Crest, starting with Nicole's quiet but devastating decision to move out of the Dupree home, a choice that cuts Anita deeper than any accusation ever could, because for the first time Anita is forced to confront the reality that love built on deception can still be real, yet utterly fragile. And as Nicole packs her belongings, every object becomes a reminder of a childhood that now feels like a carefully staged illusion, from photo albums Anita curated to milestone moments that suddenly feel like scenes from someone else's life. And what truly devastates Nicole is the realization that the lie didn't just protect her from pain, it denied her the right to grieve, to question, to know who she was becoming. And when other members of the family begin to circle the truth, reactions split the household cleanly in two, with some insisting Anita sacrificed everything to raise Nicole and deserves compassion, while others quietly admit what Nicole already knows in her bones, that good intentions do not excuse the theft of identity. And as the family fractures, buried documents begin surfacing, old hospital records that don't quite align, whispers about a woman who disappeared under suspicious circumstances the same year Nicole was born, and the possibility that Anita was not alone in orchestrating the cover-up sends chills through the community, because if Anita had help, then this lie is part of a much larger conspiracy tied to power, inheritance, and scandal, and Nicole, refusing to be protected ever again, takes matters into her own hands, launching a relentless search for her biological mother that becomes as much about reclaiming agency as it is about blood. And each clue she uncovers pulls her further away from the life she knew, forcing her to confront the terrifying possibility that the truth may be uglier than the lie. And meanwhile Anita, unraveling under the weight of guilt and fear, begins to spiral as well, haunted by flashbacks of the moment she made the choice that defined everything, moments that suggest she may have been pressured, manipulated, or even threatened into raising Nicole as her own, which only deepens the mystery and raises the stakes, because if Anita was coerced, then the real villain may still be lurking in Fairmont Crest, waiting for the truth to resurface. And as Nicole inches closer to uncovering the identity of the woman who gave birth to her, tension mounts around whether that woman is still alive, whether she knows Nicole exists, and whether she wants to be found at all. And the cruel irony is that just as Nicole begins to understand herself outside the Dupree shadow, the revelation makes her more central than ever to a web of secrets that could topple reputations and destroy alliances. And when Anita finally admits there are details she still hasn't shared, details that could change how Nicole sees herself forever, the line between protector and jailer becomes irrevocably blurred, setting the stage for a reckoning that promises not reconciliation but transformation, because Beyond the Gates is no longer just telling the story of a daughter discovering the truth about her mother. It is exposing how identity can be stolen quietly, lovingly, and how reclaiming it demands courage, confrontation, and the willingness to burn down the lies that once felt like home, leaving Nicole poised on the brink of a future that may finally be honest, but will never again be simple. As the secret continues to metastasize through Fairmont Crest, the emotional terrain grows even more treacherous because Nicole's search for her origins begins to expose not just hidden names, but buried motives. And each answer she uncovers seems designed to hurt just a little more than the last, especially when she learns that the truth about her birth was known, at least in fragments, by more people than Anita ever admitted, a revelation that transforms Nicole's sense of betrayal from personal to systemic, because it wasn't just one woman who decided she could live a lie. It was an entire circle that silently agreed Nicole didn't deserve the truth, and that realization hardened something inside her, sharpening her resolve as she begins to question everyone she once trusted, including those who now claim ignorance, yet can't quite meet her eyes. And when Nicole finally tracks down a retired nurse whose name appears repeatedly in the altered hospital records, the meeting becomes one of the most chilling moments in Beyond the Gates history, because the nurse's fear is immediate and visceral, as if she's waited decades for this reckoning, and when she finally breaks, admitting that Nicole's birth mother begged to hold her child just once before she was taken away for her own good, Nicole's grief detonates into rage because whatever story Anita told herself, whatever justification she clung to, a mother was denied her child and a daughter was denied her truth, and that knowledge fractures the last thread of sympathy Nicole had been holding on to, pushing her closer to a confrontation that can no longer be delayed. And when Nicole storms back into Fairmont Crest armed with proof, the showdown with Anita is raw, explosive, and devastating, stripping away every polished defense Anita has ever used to shield herself. And when Anita finally collapses under the weight of what she's done, confessing that she believed she was rescuing Nicole from a life of scandal and disgrace, the justification only fuels Nicole's fury, because deciding someone else's worth based on their mother's circumstances is not protection. It is cruelty disguised as love. And as this revelation reverberates outward, alliances shift dramatically, with long-standing enemies finding common ground in outrage, while former allies distance themselves from Anita to protect their own reputations, and the Dupree legacy, once unassailable, begins to crack under the weight of public scrutiny, because in Fairmont Crest, secrets have a way of becoming currency, and Nicole's stolen identity suddenly makes her both a symbol of injustice and a threat to everyone who helped bury the truth. And just when it seems the story cannot grow more heartbreaking, a new twist emerges, suggesting that Nicole's biological mother may have been silenced not just emotionally but legally, possibly paid off or forced into exile, raising the terrifying possibility that she spent her entire life believing her child was lost forever. And as Nicole grapples with that reality, the question shifts from whether she can forgive Anita to whether she can survive the truth without losing herself entirely. Because reclaiming her identity means accepting that her life was shaped by choices made in fear and ambition rather than love alone. And as Beyond the Gates pushes toward its next devastating chapter, viewers are left watching Nicole stand at the center of a collapsing dynasty, no longer a protected daughter but a woman demanding answers, justice, and ownership over her own story, even if the cost is the complete destruction of the family name she once believed defined her. And just when Fairmont Crest believes it has reached the emotional breaking point, Beyond the Gates pulls the rug out yet again, because Nicole's crusade for the truth doesn't slow, it sharpens, turning from grief-driven searching into a calculated reckoning that terrifies everyone who ever benefited from her silence. And the deeper she digs, the clearer it becomes that her birth was not merely inconvenient, but dangerous to certain powerful people. A realization that reframes her entire existence as collateral damage in a war she never knew she was born into. And when Nicole uncovers evidence that her biological mother was connected to a scandal that could have dismantled more than one prominent family, the weight of that revelation threatens to crush her, because suddenly her stolen identity feels less like an accident and more like a strategic erasure, and Anita's role, once painted as tragic and misguided, begins to look far more complicit, especially when it becomes clear that Anita didn't just accept Nicole into her home. She accepted the power that came with reshaping a child's future, and as Nicole confronts her again, this time not as a daughter seeking comfort, but as a woman demanding accountability, Anita is forced to reckon with a truth she has avoided for decades, that loving Nicole did not absolve her of the sin of stealing her life, and the moment Anita finally admits she was afraid of losing her standing, her marriage, her influence, Nicole realizes the lie was never just about protection. It was about preservation of status, and that realization snaps the last emotional tether between them, sending Nicole into a lonely but liberating isolation where she begins to redefine herself outside the Dupree name entirely, and as word spreads that Nicole may have a legitimate claim to a different legacy altogether, enemies emerge from the shadows eager to exploit her vulnerability, while others attempt sudden, suspicious kindness, revealing just how transactional truth becomes in Fairmont Crest, and yet through it all, Nicole refuses to be used again, even when the promise of answers comes with threats, because for the first time in her life, she understands that identity is not something granted by blood or upbringing but something claimed through truth, and when the possibility finally surfaces that her biological mother may still be alive, and may have been watching from afar all these years, the emotional stakes skyrocket, because reunion no longer feels like healing but like opening a wound that never had the chance to scar over, and as Anita watches from the sidelines, stripped of authority, love, and certainty, the full cost of her decision becomes undeniable because the daughter she raised is no longer hers to guide, protect, or control, and Beyond the Gates makes it painfully clear that this story is not about forgiveness neatly earned or families perfectly repaired, but about the irreversible consequences of secrets kept too long. And as Nicole steps forward into a future built not on legacy, but on truth, viewers are left with the haunting certainty that while the lie may finally be exposed, the damage it caused will echo through Fairmont Crest for generations to come, reshaping power, loyalty, and identity in ways no one, not even Anita, ever truly anticipated. The tension escalates even further as the consequences of Nicole's awakening begin to collide with forces far larger than her fractured family, because the truth, once unearthed, refuses to stay contained, and Beyond the Gates pivots from intimate betrayal to sweeping fallout when whispers turn into leaks and sealed records mysteriously find their way into the wrong hands, igniting a firestorm that threatens to expose decades of corruption hidden beneath Fairmont Crest's polished exterior. And Nicole, now painfully aware that her birth story intersects with power plays she never consented to, becomes both a target and a catalyst, drawing scrutiny from figures who once dismissed her as merely Anita's daughter, but now see her as a living key to secrets capable of toppling empires. And the cruel irony is that the more Nicole asserts her independence, the more others attempt to define her by the very bloodline she's only just learned about, forcing her to confront a haunting paradox, that freedom and truth do not always arrive hand in hand, and as she pieces together fragments of her biological mother's life, the portrait that emerges is not one of disgrace, but of defiance, a woman who challenged the wrong people, asked the wrong questions, and paid a devastating price. And realizing this reframes Nicole's pain into something sharper and more dangerous, because if her mother was silenced for daring to speak, then Nicole's pursuit of truth becomes an act of resistance rather than mere self-discovery. And this realization terrifies Anita, who watches from the margins as Nicole transforms from wounded daughter into formidable force, no longer seeking permission or absolution. And when Anita attempts one last time to justify her choices by insisting that everything she did was to keep Nicole safe, the words ring hollow, because safety without truth is just another form of imprisonment. And as Nicole publicly distances herself from the Dupree legacy, choosing transparency over privilege, the social hierarchy of Fairmont Crest begins to wobble, exposing how much of its power structure depended on silence and compliance. And alliances crumble under pressure as former confidants scramble to rewrite history in their favor. But Nicole refuses to let her story be edited again, even when the cost includes threats, isolation, and the possibility that some truths, once fully revealed, may destroy more lives than they heal. And yet, despite the danger, Nicole presses forward, driven by the unshakable belief that living honestly, even painfully, is better than living beautifully inside a lie. And as Beyond the Gates pushes toward its next seismic turning point, the narrative makes one thing devastatingly clear. Nicole's discovery that Anita is not her birth mother was never the end of the story. It was the ignition point. The moment a single woman's stolen identity began to unravel an entire world built on secrets, leaving Fairmont Crest standing on the edge of collapse, and Nicole at the center of it all, no longer defined by who raised her or who gave birth to her, but by the courage to demand the truth, no matter who it burns.